Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Evan Worley. I hope that everybody had a great weekend. I know I did. I sat back with my roommate, watched the videos of the MLB team scrimmaging and having a great time with that. I also tuned into the UFC to see the introduction of Fight Island. It was a spectacular card. I knew for a fact I couldn't miss it, and I would like to say it lived up to the hype. So for the rundown, so we have today, we will be covering the COVID-19 testing, something that we just all can't get away from at this point. The winners and losers of the recent MLB schedule release, and I would also rank at the end of the show my top 5 sleepers to win the World Series and why. I feel like this year is going to be the year for sleepers because it is such a condensed schedule. And I feel like some of these younger teams are going to be able to get hot at the right time and maybe shock all of us. Nobody knows. We'll see how that goes later in the show. But first, I would like to discuss the recent news surrounding a couple of chubby guys at the hot corner. So if you do not know, the news just released that Vladdy Jr. is going to be moving to first base and designated hitter for the upcoming season to get reps there in the shortened season. Let's see. And pictures have surfaced of Pablo Sandoval. And I don't think that is an issue for either team, that they're both coming in a little heavier than expected. For either of these two players, they're both listed above 250 pounds. Not ideal for such an athletic position such as the hot corner. So let's start with Sandoval, because people made the biggest fuss over his pictures. Now, Pablo Sandoval has gotten this reputation of being a really great, well, I wouldn't say great, he's been a very good baseball player throughout his career, which isn't wrong, but some years he has been very disappointing. For Pablo Sandoval, his batting average throughout his entire career had peaked in 2009 at 330 and only reached the 300 mark one time in the last decade. For someone who's been known throughout his career as kind of a feared hitter for a very long stretch of his career, I would say, for at least an 8-year stretch, everybody had a sense of this is a very feared hitter at the plate, but only having his batting average reached 300 mark once in the last decade. Is he really necessary for the Giants' success? His power also peaked in 2009 and only made it above 20 one time in the last decade of baseball. And I would like to remind you guys that in the last decade, the year that he was above 300 and the year that he hit above 20 home runs, he sat out almost 60 full games of the season. So he was very good, yes, but it seemed to be just that one full season. Let's go on. For a 3-year stretch in 2015 to 2017, that was his Boston years and his transition back to San Francisco, his on-base percentage was below the 300 mark. That, anybody who knows baseball knows, that's not very good. And here, the last two seasons that he's played in San Francisco, they have risen. They've gotten back up above the 300 mark, but they've just been above 300 at 310 and 313. Still not good, but it shows promise that he's back on the rise. So, not really a huge issue because it shows that still only at 33 years old, he can still produce for a very long time, and there's a key reason why he can produce for so long, and I'll give that reason later. Back to his history. So he's rated top 10 in the National League in OPS plus one time. That was 2009. He was 32nd in OPS plus in 2013 and 35th in the NL in 2014. He missed the top 50 of NL big leaguers in OPS plus in 2010, and he was ineligible to even being ranked for OPS plus in 2011, 2012, 2015, all the way through 2019 due to injuries and not really being on the field. So you're looking at Pablo Sandoval, and he has this reputation mainly because of one postseason, his 2012 postseason where he won World Series MVP. And granted, that was a stellar postseason. He batted 500 in the World Series with 3 homers. That's just about as clutch as you can get in the biggest stage of them all. Now, but is he really a key part for regular season success? He hasn't really shown it throughout his career. Now, he's missed, let's see, we'll go his full season WAR. This is a full season. Peaked at 4.3, which isn't even categorized as an all-star. If you look at the explanation of WAR, 8+ is an MVP, 5+ is considered an all-star. He peaked at 4.3. Just batting-wise, he doesn't even rank as an all-star. In his best full season in the regular season. So is this, once again, I would like to ask, is this really an issue that he's a little too big? And let's go into his defensive runs saved. So with his fielding, I like to choose defensive runs saved. I think it's the best way of measuring a player's defensive capabilities. Now, when you look at defensive runs saved above average per Baseball Reference, his high at third base in 2011 was 14. In 2011, his high was 14 at third base. Now he's 14 defensive runs saved above average. That is an incredible year. I'm not going to take that away from him at all. That is very good for him. But his next highest in his second best year of 2014 is only 2. So his second highest career defensive runs saved is only 2 runs. And then his career number in defensive runs saved above average at the third base position is negative 25. Negative 25. For a third baseman, you're not ever going to want that. You don't ever want your third baseman to be in the negatives. You don't want any fielder to be in the negatives. But if they are capable of putting in a stellar offensive season, you can kind of, give or take a few runs saved. But he isn't even that good batting-wise during those years. So I don't know where this ideology that Pablo Sandoval is a key part of San Francisco's success has come from, which is why they're talking about how his weight's going to be a major factor. I don't really think it is. And another reason why it's going to be an easier transition for Vladdy Jr. to make, and he's gotten a lot less fuss over his weight and his explosiveness on the field. And here's why. Now, he also had a negative 9 defensive runs saved above average. Negative 9 defensive runs saved at the third base position, not very good. But here's why the transition is going to go way better for Vladdy Jr. than it does, and probably no one's even probably going to talk about it besides me. And it's because there has been no elite first baseman in Toronto last season. Like last season, Toronto, their first base situation defensively was awful. It wasn't good. Now they played the majority of their games at first base were between Justin Smoak and Rowdy Tellez. Now, per Baseball Reference, when you go into the combined defensive runs saved for last season, Tellez and Smoak combined for negative 9 defensive runs saved. And you're looking at it like, okay, well, Justin Smoak you don't really expect a lot of, and Rowdy Tellez is kind of new. Rowdy Tellez in his 2 full seasons has combined for a negative 4 career defensive runs saved, and Justin Smoak is a negative 31 career defensive runs saved. So when you're signing guys like that and you have that expectation as the Toronto Blue Jays do, they already know what's coming. They're like, okay, he's going to be a bad infielder. and it's going to be fine. He's just going to, smack a few taters around. But when you have a guy like Vladdy Jr., who's no one's arguing is going to be one of the best hitters in the game, give him a few years, let him get his ears wet in the league, and he's going to be a major problem. We saw that in the home run derby. This guy has light tower power, and he has the ability to hit to all parts of the field and hit for average, and he's actually kind of speedy, so he could be a little threat on the base path. So when you have a guy like that, it's easier to transition Vladdy Jr. to first base and to DH because you're not losing anything. You had this expectation already. Now let's go back to Pablo Sandoval. Pablo Sandoval, he was behind Brandon Belt at first base, so he wasn't able to get the reps at first base, where he did significantly better. At first base, his career defensive runs saved is at 5 points above average. Now, I'm not saying that 5 above average isn't going to be something that, is going to open up the checkbook for, the Steinbrenners or anything like that. But it's something not to be scoffed at. It's significant. It's 30 points better than what he is at third base. So he can cover first base, not very well at third. But the thing stopping him was Brandon Belt. Brandon Belt has a career plus 54 defensive runs saved, and has had the one thing that Pablo Sandoval has not in his career, and that's a steady bat. He bats, you know what you're getting from Brandon Belt. He's going to bat between 240 and 275. He's going to hit between 21 and 14 home runs. He's going to drive in about 80 runs, and he's going to play solid first base. That is what the Giants want, and that's what the Giants need at the end of the day. They've somehow built a success off of very mediocre guys, really, besides Buster Posey, the MVP season. But like when you look at the Giants throughout their World Series runs, where the 3 and 6 years, they didn't really have anybody who was that stellar. Like the best pitcher they had was Madison Bumgarner, and you look at it now, he's kind of the Eli Manning of baseball. Their best player is Buster Posey throughout that, and yeah, he had a great MVP season, but the only memorables, like for his entire career, we remember more the broken leg than we do anything from his major league season. So the Giants have been able to, thrive without, the stellar news, the stellar players, the bank breakers in a way. And I think it's going to be no different, because one thing that the NL has brought on for this season, and they're definitely going to bring in for the rest of the future, is universal DH. The universal DH is going to save Pablo Sandoval's career, which is why it's a major reason why I don't think that his career is going to be, belittled due to his weight, is because they can just stash him at DH. He's shown that he can grow batting-wise. He's comfortable in the city of San Francisco. He's comfortable in that field, and it shows throughout his major uptick in batting average throughout the past 2 years. On base percentage, OPS plus. His power has jumped. He hit 5 more homers last year than he did the year before. So what I'm saying is that with the universal DH coming to, the National League, Pablo Sandoval and, the other bigger guys, you shouldn't make a big fuss over their weight. Like, the weight shows that it doesn't matter, especially when you're hitting. There's always been bigger, unathletic guys who've been stashed at DH throughout their entire, when they need to be, just to, hit dingers. You have the Adam Dunns, you had the Mo Vaughns, the David Ortiz. I mean, towards the end of his career, I'm not saying that, Pablo Sandoval's anywhere near this guy, but heck, even Tony Gwynn was a little chubby at the end of his career. So when pictures of players come out and they are, looking like a roly-poly, or, living up to his nickname of, the Kung Fu Panda, looking dang near identical, we shouldn't look at them as liabilities, especially not anymore. The universal designated hitter is going to be great for the NL. It's going to be great for everybody. It's going to be great for baseball. And another reason for that working out is the batting averages of pitchers has gone down significantly throughout the years. They have not, like the pitchers, their batting averages have gone down because the metrics have gone so high. We need to show pitchers that how to, change their arm slots. How, picking their knee up a little bit higher, doing a little slide step, doing this, that, the third to, increase spin rate, stuff like that. That's going to help them in the long run. So they're focusing more on figuring out how to do all of this and not focusing on, hey, let me move the runner over, let me figure out how to slap this over the third baseman's head, and all that kind of stuff. So with the pitcher's batting average going down, the universal DH is, I would be shocked if it does not get picked up in the new CBA. And what we're going to do is we're going to empower these fat guys, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be slapping dingers all over the yard, even though the league is slowly transitioned to guys like Christian Yelich hitting the ball 500 feet. We need to empower these fat guys. So next up, I'm going to talk about the COVID-19 testing, but first, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will be back in just a second.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Alright everybody, welcome back to the show. We just got talking about the big boys at third base, and now we are going to transition into the reoccurring topic of the COVID-19 testing. Now, some players are speaking out against the delays surrounding the tests and saying it's been over a week since they've been given the results, kind of like Chris Bryant. We have some players that are, on the bubble, no pun intended, saying that they may sit out the season to protect their families because they have kids on the way, like Chris Bryant and, the game's best player, Mike Trout. You have some players that have backed out entirely due to family reasons, like Buster Posey, David Price, and Nick Markakis, just to name a few. And you also see some players, like Trevor Bauer, who have said that the COVID testing has been a smooth process. I find this weird that they're not taking this as seriously as they should. Like, this should be the number one thing that the MLB needs to do successfully, is handle the COVID-19 testing and make sure that this is going to be a safe season. With it being a 60-game season, it is a non-stop sprint to the World Series. And the last strike-shortened season in 1995, they really only missed 18 games. Like, we've never had a season like this. And essentially it's picking up right after the trade deadline. I actually believe that this season, if handled properly, can, I use this in quotations, save the game of baseball from dying out from the younger demographic. Let's go to the NBA, for example. In my lifetime, they've had 2 strike-shortened seasons in 1999 and 2012. What those seasons had in common was an emergence of bright young stars that helped a team make it to the championship and set the tone for the upcoming decade. Go back to 99, the Spurs introduced a rookie named Tim Duncan who won the Finals MVP. And in 2012, the babies on the block in Oklahoma City came through and steamrolled the Western Conference on the way to the Finals, where they eventually got beat by LeBron, Wade, and Bosh and, the Heatles. But, let's take this back to baseball. The Indians went from below 500 to 66 and 47 before the strike in 94 to winning 100 games in a shortened season in 1995, while only having 4 starters, that is pitchers included, over the age of 30. Now, you might ask, okay, that's a little, maybe that's an anomaly. Let's go to the Braves, who they met in the World Series that year. The Braves steamrolled through the NL and made it all while having Only one player over the age of 30, and it was the crime dog, Fred McGriff, at age 31. If history has taught us anything, is that a young team could come out of nowhere, get hot, run their way to a World Series appearance. I'll dive into who I think that'll be later in the show, but what I'm trying to say is that younger players in the game are all primed to show their skills atop the biggest stage, and these tests have to be taken with the utmost seriousness by the heads of the MLB. The game can't afford to lose Chris Bryant. It can't afford to lose Mike Trout or scare any of the young, exciting players like Lindor, Baez, Wilson Contreras. You got Acuna. You got Albies. You got Tim Anderson. You got Yelich. There's Eloy Jimenez. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The league does not have the opportunity to waste this time. And this being the best opportunity for the Angels to make it back, to, make a playoff push for the first time since 2015. When Mike Trout made it to the postseason, that was the biggest thing. The whole storyline was one legend leaves and the other arrives, because 2015 was also the year that Derek Jeter retired and the Yankees didn't make the playoffs. But that was the whole storyline. Derek Jeter goes down, in comes the new Derek Jeter. Here comes the new Captain Clutch. Here comes Mike Trout in the postseason. But that trip was a disaster. Mike Trout batted 1 for 12 against the Kansas City Royals, albeit it was a dazzling home run. But we can't waste this time. You can't have one of the widely known greatest players in the game, arguably could be the greatest player to ever pick up a bat, not make it to the postseason anytime in his prime, and this seems to be the time where they can do it. If I was Rob Manfred, I would have Angel Hernandez be behind the plate, calling every game the Angels play, making sure that they make it to at least a wild card spot. The Yankees are being the Yankees and continuously getting eaten alive by the injury bug. Sevy's going down along with Masahiro Tanaka in that dangerous event. He seems to be fine, though. He might be back by the end of the season. I hope so. All that while Stanton and Judge are one swing away from being sidelined for the entire season, and Gary Sanchez is a mean word away from throwing a total hissy fit and, giving up on the season in general. The American League alone is entirely up for grabs. Let's go through it. Who's the best in the West? Are we really going to say that the Astros are the favorites this season when they still have a target the size of the sun sitting on their backs? What about the Oakland A's? Can they piece together a stellar season with their pitching and, without really having a player on the, at the dish who's really known for being no one to mess with? Let's go back to the Angels. Yeah, they got Rendon. But we've seen big contracts burn them in the past with C.J. Wilson, Josh Hamilton, Vernon Wells, and, the list goes on. Plus, I didn't really see them address the elephant in the room with the pitching staff, besides handing the keys to Julio Teheran, who seems to struggle everywhere besides Miami. Now we got Texas. Texas seems to be a good young startup team. They got Gallo back after COVID-19. He's cleared to play. But do they have the depth? Do they have the pitching? Is Mike Minor going to have another stellar year like he did last year? Who knows? Who's going to be the lead of that pitching staff? I think it's safe to say that we avoid Seattle. They could go on an incredibly hot run like they did in 2017, but, when they went into the Bronx, they got smacked around and, never really got back into the conversation after that. But I feel like, maybe they could do it. Maybe they could go on a 60-game, just surprise everybody, kind of like they did last year, but, instead of doing it for 15 games, they do it for, maybe 40 and go out to an incredible lead, and, maybe they can't be caught back. That's just the AL West. Let's go to the AL Central. The AL Central has just as big as questions as the AL West. The Indians are going, are they going to commit to winning a World Series one more year before they inevitably sell all their assets because they're quote-unquote broke? The Chicago White Sox are going to be my most watched team this season. They're so exciting. They're so young. They have just everything. The future is so bright in front of them. But with Michael Kopech backing out of the season, Do they have the depth to fully make a push? What about the late stretch? There is no quote-unquote dog days of summer, but if someone goes down, there needs to be someone to come up right behind him. And with Kopech down, you're already down one of your best starters. Can they make it? I mean, only time will tell. Can the Tigers come out and shock the world and push, make a playoff push? I think they have a farm system that'll let them do it. I think that they should bring up Casey Mize. So they also have Cody Clemens playing second base. They got some good young pieces. They're no one to be slept on, I feel. I would not put it past them if they can make a push to the playoffs. And, in the AL Central, I think it's okay that we just kind of blow past the Royals. I don't see the Royals being much competition. But then again, I didn't see the Royals being a competition in 2015 when they made their run. Who knows what could happen? And let's go to the Twins, the division winners last year. The Twins have not made it. They've made it twice. Only 2 times since the 70s have they made the playoffs in back-to-back years. Can they do it again? They lost C.J. Cron. They lost Jonathan Scope. Yeah, they signed Josh Donaldson. That's all fun and games. Once again, I didn't see him attack the pitching staff. Are they going to have the pitching depth, or are they going to throw a former Uber driver in a deciding game of the ALDS? Who knows? These are questions that should be enticing to anyone who's just missing sports in general. Now, let's go to the AL East. It's as stacked as always. It's going to be a war of attrition between the Yanks, the Red Sox, and the Rays. The Yanks, like I said before, they can't get out of their own way and, seem to get hurt with seem to have a big name go down like once a week. Then you have the Red Sox, who have the great lineup, but they didn't really attack pitching either. Do they have the pitching depth to make a push? The Rays somehow just out of nowhere became the most complete team in the AL East. They have the batting. I think that they have the batting to get through to the postseason. I know for a fact they have the pitching to get through to go to the postseason because their bullpen is downright nasty. So, I think the only thing that we can really say is that the Rays are going to make the postseason. The Yankees could get too hurt. You don't know. The Red Sox could get hurt. They could make a push. They could, bomb. Every team in the AL Central is no lock, and neither are they in the AL West. So, that's just one side. That's just one league. Let's go to the NL, for example. You got the Atlanta Braves. They've been young. They've been exciting. They've made it to the postseason and won the NL East 2 years in a row. But can they do it for a third? They lost Dallas Keuchel to Chicago, to the White Sox. Can the new guys, can Max Fried and Mike Soroka, could they just fill right back into their role that they had last year without, a seamless transition? No one can count for sure. They did go out and completely overhaul their bullpen, which me, being a Braves fan, excites me. It seems like every bullpen pitcher on the market was just getting tossed money by the Braves, which was insane. So I think that they are primed to make a deep run in this postseason. And with them being so youthful, it's going to make for exciting baseball. They're going to be energized. Everybody knows the Braves as being the happy guys where Ozzie Albies and Ronald Acuna are laughing and smiling and dancing around, bringing fans into the game. You got the Phillies. The Phillies are loaded with talent. They got Jake Arrieta. They got David Robertson. They got Bryce Harper. JT Realmuto. Can they figure it out? Can they get past the hump with their new coach? Joe Girardi seems to be a no-nonsense guy. But can he wrangle them all in and put them towards one singular focus? We'll find out. The Nationals, they won the World Series last year. And not many people seem to be talking about them as, potential to repeat. Granted, they did lose, I would say, their second best hitter last year, Rendon, to the Angels. But who's to say no one else can get hot? I mean, the most clutch at bats I thought came from Howie Kendrick, who no one would have suspected before the season started would have been the guy in the World Series that would have came up, the biggest. Juan Soto is going to step into another role, and he's going to be I think he's going to have another great year, probably push for MVP. And we go to the New York Mets. Mets have been kind of weird the past few years. Everybody thought that they were selling last season, and they ended up buying Marcus Stroman. Now with Marcus Stroman coming in with a full season, well, as much of a full season as you can get, I guess, teaming him up with Jacob deGrom and Noah Syndergaard, Pete Alonso, Michael Conforto. These guys, these are names that can make a push towards the playoffs also. Nobody knows. Go to the NL Central. It seems to be a 3-team race between the Cardinals, the Cubs, and the Reds. The Reds sneakily might be, they might mess around and be the champions of the NL. They have an incredible infield. Their pitching staff is amazing. Luis Castillo, his changeup is insane. And they have a really nice bullpen. Could they go from a non-playoff team to the World Series? I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. Can the Cubs hold them off and make it to another postseason with their young stars? I don't think if Chris Bryant leaves, they'll be able to do that. And the St. Louis Cardinals. Jack Flaherty can have another great year. I mean, I saw his videos when he was in spring training before the whole COVID lockdown came in, and he was looking nasty. He was insane. Can he put the team on his back and make it to another postseason? They had pretty good depth. And the Cardinals always seem to play better than expected. It's so strange to me how they always do that. But it never fails. So you can't, so far we have 4 caliber playoff teams in the NL East, 3 in the NL Central, and when we go to the West, obviously the Dodgers are going to be, massive contenders. They're favorites to win the World Series. But with David Price backing out, Clayton Kershaw's getting older. Luis Urias has not really been as consistent as anybody needs. They have a lot of youth at the back end. They may panic knowing Dave Roberts' mistrust of the bullpen. They may go to 3 starters and just push the back end starters and Derek May into the bullpen and just go with the 3-man rotation for 60 games. Is that smart? I don't think so. But it could potentially happen. Then you go to who I think is the second best team in the NL West. You got the San Diego Padres. San Diego Padres had a bright, exciting year last year. They're bringing back Chris Paddock. They're bringing back Fernando Tatis off of injury. You got Hosmer. There's Manny Machado at the hot corner. There's such a bright future in San Diego. Can they get over the hump? Can they surprise everybody? Can they run away with the NL West? You got the Arizona Diamondbacks. Pardon me. The Diamondbacks, they picked up Madison Bumgarner, who I said before in the last segment, I feel like is, the Eli Manning of baseball. But who's to say that he doesn't have one more magical run in him? It's 60 games. It's a straight playoff push. And last time Madison Bumgarner was in the postseason, it was the most spectacular baseball anyone has ever seen. And they have players like Christian Walker who can, with light tower power. Ketel Marte is coming off a spectacular season. Who knows if he can't duplicate it? There are tons of ways that we can really break down the season. Let's keep it going. Got the Colorado Rockies. Colorado Rockies aren't, you don't look at them and say, oh, here comes greatness with the Colorado Rockies this season. But I don't think we were saying that in 2007 when they made the World Series or the last time that they made the postseason in general. we didn't look at the Colorado Rockies and be like, oh man, these guys are going to be world beaters. But they still got Nolan Arenado. Ian Desmond may have backed out, but they still have some power on their team. Charlie Blackmon's still there. Who knows? Maybe Kyle Freeland could figure out what was wrong with him last year and, come back and have another Cy Young caliber season out there in Coors Field. And lastly, the San Francisco Giants. I mean, I told you how I felt about Pablo Sandoval with the Universal DH coming. That's going to be at least something to pay attention to. You got Brandon Belt to see how much he has left. You got Buster Posey may have backed out, but you have more players. That means there's more opportunities for people to excel. Who knows? Maybe these guys who backed out may have Wally Pipped themselves. Those are storylines that we have to really hold on to and really focus in on, because I think that this is going to be an exciting year. All these questions are making for one incredible season in the making. And like I said, it's a 60-game sprint. There is no time to mess around again. And Manfred seems to be misjudging the situation and craziness, and it seems to be, inevitable at this point. Why aren't the testing concerns the number one priority? I certainly don't know. It confuses the heck out of me. I guess at the end of the day, these players are just going to be fighting for another piece of metal. And so he doesn't really focus on that. He just wants the title of being, I'm the commissioner of baseball. It's not, I love baseball. We need to treat these players with the utmost respect. It's, I just kind of wanted to be the commissioner of baseball. And now all this stuff's happening that I wasn't ready for. And what am I supposed to do about it? I'm still excited for the league. I know you guys are still excited for the league. But I can't help but being a little bit pessimistic that this lack of attention to detail is going to cause another flare-up and, maybe cancel the league in general. Maybe we only get a week before everybody starts, every single team has had a positive test. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen. Alrighty, so I will be taking a quick break, and we will be back in a moment with the winners and losers of the schedule launch.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Alright, everyone, and I am back to bounce off the questions that I proposed in the last segment about the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to be looking over the recent schedule release in the MLB, and I am going to break down the winners and losers of the release. This is going to be in no particular order, so let's just dive right into it. The number one winner, I believe, is clearly the Cincinnati Reds. The Cincinnati Reds have the 5th fewest miles traveled. That's huge right there. Everybody knows that when it gets to those dog days of summer, that the long travel has a lot of wear and tear on the players, and that's going to be huge when it comes to miles traveled. Their schedule became the easiest based on the strength of opponents. They lost .012 off their win-loss percentage since the restructure. Now, you might not think that that's going to be that big of a deal, but that really is big of a deal because they don't have to play the AL East in interleague play. They were supposed to play the AL East in interleague, which means they would have had to go play the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Rays, who are three teams that are poised to go not only to the playoffs, but two of those teams might meet in the ALCS. So that is a huge break for the Cincinnati Reds. They also don't have to play the NL East and AL West in interleague play. That is incredible because the NL East has an average of a .518 win percentage, and the NL West has a .515 win percentage last season. So instead of dealing with the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Nationals, the Rays, the Red Sox, the Mets, they're going to get the NL Central, who only has a win percentage, expected win percentage of .478. Now, do I personally think that that's going to be .78 or .478? I don't. I think that, the White Sox are going to be a lot better, but based on numbers alone, it looks like the Reds are going to be primed to take the NL Central. The Reds will win out here because they play 10 games against the Royals, and the Tigers, while the Cubs and Brewers only play 7. That's because the Tigers are Cincinnati's designated rival this year, meaning they will play 6 times. They have 6 of their 60 games against the Tigers. That is huge. Throw in 10 more games against the Pirates, and the Reds have 1/3 of their schedule against the Royals, Tigers, and Pirates, and they combined for a .360 win percentage last year. That is insane. So the Reds are primed to make a push, and they definitely are the number one winners of this. Another winner, the Minnesota Twins. The Twins are kind of like the Mariners in a sense because they are about to share. It's a share of their schedule is taken up by the 4 teams in their division. Now, the 3 teams that they're going to be playing the most are the White Sox, who had a projected win percentage of exactly .501 this season, and 2 rebuilding teams, the Royals and the Tigers. Now, like I said in the previous segment, the Tigers could pull off a miracle. I'm not ruling it out, but it's also highly unlikely. But nobody knows. And on paper, the Twins are looking like they're going to do what they haven't been able to do many times, which is make the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. Will they win the Central? No one knows, but they have a chance. Half of their season is against 3 teams with a collective win percentage of .446. Another reason that you want to bet on the Twins to make the postseason this year. I consider the Yankees a winner, and they kind of have a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde season because they open up in Murderer's Row. The Yankees open the 2020 season with 33 of their first 36 games against teams with a .500 win percentage or better. So the fact that they're entering the season kind of injury prone doesn't help them at all. But if they're able to survive like only the Yankees have in the past, they are going into the biggest cupcake schedule down the stretch. Now, September 2nd comes around. They play 20 of their last 23 games against the Blue Jays, the Orioles, and the Marlins that all lost 95 games or more last year. 95 or more losses from the 3 teams down the stretch. If they're able to keep it within 1, 2, 3 games of the Rays in that first 36 games, they are primed to run away with the AL East. So keep an eye on the Yankees this year because the Yankees, once again, they tend to be injury prone, but they also have the youth to push through all of that. And if they do, that is going to be incredible. Another winner, oddly enough, Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays' opponents had an average winning percentage of .482. They're the only AL East team that makes the list of the easiest schedules, and it's because they'll get 6 interleague games against the Marlins, who lost 105 games last year. So since they changed the interleague schedule, they don't have to play the NL East or the NL Central. They get the Marlins. Like, the Rays have to play the Marlins instead of the Reds, the Cardinals, the Cubs. That's such a win. You cannot ask to get a bigger win off the schedule revamp. Now, let's go to the Cubs. The Cubs are also a winner in this because, you know, when you're chasing down your rivals, you kind of want to play them head-to-head. But the Cubs won't go head-to-head with their division contenders. Their final 12 games are against the AL Central teams, the Indians, Twins, and the White Sox and the Pirates. Now, some may say, oh, how do you consider that a win when you say that the White Sox are going to be great, the Indians, you know, are going to be contenders, and, you know, the Twins have a really easy schedule? Well, like I said in the previous segment, the Twins, you know, you don't know about their pitching staff. Their pitching staff has always been a question. I think their pitching staff will forever be a question. You know, war of attrition, all that stuff. Like, these guys can go down. You never know. Like I said, it's a huge question. Huge question for the end of the season. And, you know, teams like the Indians, if the Indians go, let's say, if they go 13-17 in their first 30 games, they're backing out. There is no playoff push. They might just write it all off, just go into next season, this offseason, ready to shop. I don't know why they would do that, but they've done crazier things in the past. So they might run into the Indians at the right time. You know, the White Sox, you know, they may hit a rough stretch. They're young. Granted, they can get hot at any moment, but they can also get cold at any moment. You never know what's going to happen with them. And, I mean, it's the nobody expects the Pirates to contend this year, so down the stretch, you get a team like the Pirates, you can't really, you know, wish for anything more. And lastly, of the winners, of the Oakland A's. The A's look like they're going to be the toughest opponent in the AL West, hands down. They always somehow are able to pull off an incredible offense. I never know how they do it, but they always have a respectable offense. They always have a respectable pitching staff. And in this case, you know, the AL West looks like the toughest division, but Oakland's also being the ones, you know, that are upping the projected win totals. The Rangers are going to be good, sure, but the Rangers also struggled a lot against the A's last year. The Angels are looking to be improved, but, you know, we don't know the condition of Mike Trout. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? We currently don't know that yet. If things change and the Angels don't have Mike Trout going into the season, then there goes one playoff contender already. And the Rangers have had a couple positive COVID tests. What if they get more and they get another star player out for 2 weeks? It's not going to look that great for them. The Astros, like I said in the last segment, we don't know. They still have the giant target on their back. Can they fight through that? Can they fight through the criticism? Can they fight through every single player gunning for them? Every single player is going to bring it every single night against the Astros. And with that looming over their heads, you know, they may get fatigued really early, and, you know, the A's might be able to take it. The A's will play only 17 games against teams that with a record of 500 or better, which is tied for the fewest in the MLB with the Los Angeles Dodgers. 17. Not even a third of their season are against winning opponents. So take it that the A's had a playoff run last year. They had great pitching. They have really good hitting. They're playing most of their games in California, and 17 of their games are against winning opponents. I think that is a huge win for the A's, so look out for them to make a huge push and probably take the AL West. So, that being said, we will go into the losers of the schedule. Now, I have Boston as a loser in the schedule revamp, and that's because their first 13 games are against the Rays and the Yankees. Now, the Yankees are huge. Everybody knows the rivalry between Boston and the Yankees. The Rays have the pitching staff to completely shut down their offense. Now, Boston's offense is great and everything, but I always take pitching over hitting. I think that's a cardinal rule of baseball. A great defense is way better than a great offense. And so if the Rays are able to miss their bats in the first 13 games, the Yankees are able to, have a Ollie Frazier slugfest. I think that Boston could start off in a huge hole, and it's going to be very hard for them to climb out of, especially since the Yankees have such an easy schedule down the backstretch, and the Tampa Bay Rays are also primed to have one of the easiest schedules in the game. We got, next up, the Texas Rangers. Now, the Texas Rangers are like the opposite of the Yankees. They play 17 of their first 22 games against losing teams in 2019. Those teams being Colorado. They're actually, all of their first series look like this through those first 22 games. It's Colorado, Arizona, San Francisco, Oakland, the Angels, Seattle, Colorado, San Diego, Seattle, and Oakland. And you may think, a lot of those teams had losing seasons last year, but also those are teams that got a lot better this upcoming season. Everyone's expecting the Rangers to be better, but do we really think that they're just going to stomp all over these teams? I actually don't think so. I think that, Oakland, obviously they struggled. The Rangers struggled against Oakland a lot last year. They even struggled against the Angels, and the Angels were not in any position to contend last season. The Padres I know the Padres are going to be better. That's something that I'm willing to bet on. And they could have slip-ups against Arizona and Colorado. Against the divisional opponents last year, the Texas Rangers were 28-33 against those opponents. And yeah, it's a new year, but they also have to travel the most miles during the 2020 season. They have to travel a total of 14,706 miles. Now, if that's better for the Reds that they don't have to travel, it's going to be incredibly worse for the Texas Rangers when they have to travel that much, especially with, the exposure to COVID and all the struggles that come with that. They could be having a lot of players on the DL. So I don't expect the Rangers to be that great this year, and it's mainly because of the traveling, and they did not do well against the teams that they're supposed to be, mashing on at the start of the season. And now let's get on to, personally, my favorite team, and a team that I think is going to be great this year, the Atlanta Braves. The Atlanta Braves are huge losers in this because they're playing in an insane division. Like I expressed before, there are 4 teams in that division, including them, that could make the postseason and make a run deep into the postseason. They have all their games against the Nationals, the Mets, the Phillies. They get a few little games with the Marlins here and there, but not enough to really offset those games. They have a home-and-home against Boston. They'll play 14 of their 20 interleague games against the Yankees, Rays, and Red Sox. That is murderer's row. So when they leave their division, which is arguably the best in baseball, they're going to the NL East and playing the top 3 AL East teams. That is a rough schedule. Granted that also that the Atlanta Braves have a very young pitching staff. They have very young players on the field, which is nice, but the pitching staff, I don't know if they're going to be able to handle that kind of workload. So I'm a little skeptical going into the season. Oh, man. And on top of that, they're one of 7 teams that will play 20 games in 20 days. They do not get, for the first 3 weeks of the season, they do not get a break. While going through that type of schedule, the Braves are going to have a rough start to the season. And if they're able to get through it, I think they're primed to win the NL East again. And knowing the history of the Braves, probably get bounced in the first round. But I'm looking forward to it. Next up, we have another NL East team, the New York Mets. Now, the New York Mets are a lot like the Braves. They, same division. They have to go through the same tough map that the Braves have to go through. But the thing about that separates the Braves and the Mets is the Mets seem to be mostly pitching and have a couple guys who can beat you with a long ball on the offensive side. The Braves seem to have a lot of people who can, beat you on the offensive side, but are still relatively unproven in the aspect of pitching. Starters don't look that great in Atlanta. Starters look amazing for the Mets. The Mets defense and, ability to get on base, not so great. The ability to get on base in the starting defense for the Braves is amazing. And they also have two prospects that I'm looking forward to with Christian Pache and Drew Waters. I would like to see who the Braves, who they replace Nick Markakis with. I have yet to look into that, but I'm excited to see if they're going to bring up one of the rookies to go in, or if they're just going to, maybe put Charlie Culberson in right field, the kind of do-it-all guy that we have. Or maybe Johan Camargo. That would be cool. But along with the Mets, they also have to go play the Yankees a lot. They got 6 games against the Yankees this year, and they will play 43 of their 60 games against teams that were 500 or better in 2019. 43. So they are like the exact opposite of the Oakland A's in every way, shape, or form, and that is terrible if you're a Mets fan going into this season. And now, lastly, the last loser on this list, we have the Los Angeles Angels. The Los Angeles Angels have the toughest schedule in baseball right now. They have it does not look good. They have to go through the entire AL and NL West full of teams that are competing for a World Series. There is no team that's going to be, rebuilding. You have, they have the A's, the Astros. They got to play the Dodgers 6 times in their natural interleague play. 26 games. 43.3% of their schedule is against 3 of the best teams in baseball last year. 43% are against 3 of the best teams in baseball. That is insane. And, you don't know if Shohei Ohtani is going to be able to pitch the whole season. Like, Julio Teheran was their big free agent landing in the off season for pitching, but he's a name. He's not really someone that you can rely on to be an ace anymore, and at least in my experience he hasn't been. So the Angels have a lot to worry about going into this upcoming season, and I find it hard to believe that they're going to be able to make it to the postseason, especially with the decision of Mike Trout looming over their heads. If he decides to come back, I think they might have a legitimate chance. Emphasis on might. But if he doesn't come back, then I don't think there's any chance that they'll be able to make it to the postseason this year. And I'm going to take one quick break, and I will be right back with my top 5 World Series contenders for this upcoming season. I will be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for staying to the end. It really means a lot. So, to recap the last segment, we spoke about the winners and losers of the schedule release. Now, lastly, the moment you have all been waiting for, we're talking about my top 5 sleeper teams to play for the World Series. Now, I'm not saying that these teams are going to be locks in any way, shape, or form, but what I do feel is if things do go right for these teams, I do think they have a legitimate chance for playing for the World Series or at least get as close as they possibly can. Like I've stated throughout this podcast, with the strike shortened season, well, not strike, but COVID shortened season, it's going to be a race. And I do think that youth is going to take over. The youth is going to set up these teams for success. And I think that just one team out of nowhere is going to make the World Series. So, at number 5, I have the New York Mets. Now, I know I said that they have one of the toughest schedules going against the entire NL and AL East squads. But one thing that they have going for them, so does everybody else in that division. I don't feel like that tough schedule is going to change much for them because they do have the pitching. I think they do have the pitching. I think that since it's murderer's row for everybody, it's just, who can get through it, who can survive. And I think that the New York Mets are built to survive. They have a solid core group of guys. And with that, I think that they can do a ton of damage. Like their starting pitching, for example. They have, DeGrom, Stroman, Porcello, Matz, Waka. Unfortunately, they're going to have to go through this without Noah Syndergaard out for the season with a torn UCL. But, it is what it is at this point. Obviously, they would love to have him, but it's not like they're devastated by the news during the middle of the season. They can at least prep for it earlier than expected. So let's look at the combined numbers of the starting rotation. What's a baseball podcast without sabermetrics? So we'll dive right into these guys' combined FIP. So between these starters, their combined FIP is 4.8. Granted, that's not great, but it's also not bad in the grand scheme of things. Match the rotation with Edwin Diaz, who can have some sort of bounce back year. You have Betances, if he can stay healthy. He was electric for the Yankees, and it's not like he's going across the country and completely had to uproot his life. He's staying in New York. He's just, going to the other side. If he's healthy, and then you got Juris Familia, you got Brad Brack, Seth Lugo, and, a team ready pitching-wise to make a push, even with Thor down for the season. I still think that, they could survive without Syndergaard. And, especially with this type of bullpen, teams are built off speed and pitching. I feel like good World Series teams have to be fast, disciplined, and have really great pitching. And, you could see that with, last year's team, the Washington Nationals. They were disciplined. They were one of the most disciplined teams in the postseason, and they had insanely good pitching. You go to the year before that, you had the Red Sox. The Red Sox, their pitching staff got incredibly hot at the right time, and they didn't let, the Dodgers pitchers get the best of them. They sat back and made the Dodgers come to them. Then, go to the Astros right before that. You got, they didn't let the Dodgers take advantage of them. They were poised. They were fast. They were young. They had the pitching to go challenge them. So I think that the Mets have this core that they can go through. And now, they're not just all pitching either. They have names like Pete Alonso, Robbie Cano, Jeff McNeil, Jed Lowry, J.D. Davis, Rosario, Cespedes, Nimmo, Conforto, Marisnik. That's not a squad you should sleep on this upcoming season. Absolutely not. In no way, shape, or form should you sleep on them. I feel like if they can survive, like all these other teams, if they can just survive that murderer's row and they come out on top, they're going to be poised to make a deep run in this postseason. And at number 4, I got the San Diego Padres. Now, I know the Padres were last in their division last year, but they also lost their best player early. And by best player, I'm not saying Manny Machado. I actually thought that on the field, Fernando Tatis Jr. was their best player. He was the most exciting player. He was coming up clutch. He could do everything for them, and he was a real catalyst to that team. And when they lost him for the year, it was devastating for the San Diego Padres. So I feel like that they can, with him back, if he can stay healthy, they're filming a team with Hosmer. Hosmer in the postseason is an absolute animal. There's nothing you could take away from Eric Hosmer with his postseason accolades. If you can survive his mediocrity through the regular season and put him in the postseason, he can make magic happen. You saw it with the Royals. I mean, back-to-back World Series from the Royals. That's, a lot of it was him. He came up and had a lot of clutch hits and played really good defense. I feel like if he can get to the postseason and they could just let him loose, he can make some big plays and they can get stuff done. Manny Machado, still nothing to be scoffed at. I mean, last year was his first year on the Padres. He, everybody has growing pains. Granted, he didn't change divisions, and he had been in LA or in California for a little bit, being with the LA Dodgers. But, still in a new city, still having to find out, okay, what do I do here? What do I do there? It's not an easy task. So Manny Machado having his second season to gel with these guys, I think is a really big deal, and I think he can, if he gets his head on straight and actually realizes the type of potential that this team has, I think that he could be one of the best players in the game this year. You got Will Myers. Will Myers, he's a solid player. He's no one to be scoffed at. You got, Trammell, Juan Lagares. You got Trent Grisham. Like, they even picked up Brian Dozier, and, Austin Hedges is a really good catcher. I feel like this is a team that could be poised to make a run to the playoffs. And if they get to the playoffs, I feel like that they can play, they can play a big role. And, I think why. I think that they can make a big role, and that's because they have good pitching also. Like, Chris Paddock last year was amazing. He was a very, very, very good pitcher. And then they have, Lamet, Davies, Lucchesi, and they brought in a veteran talent like Garrett Richards. Who says Garrett Richards can't have, a late career resurgence? Kind of like, A.J. Burnett or Francisco Liriano did with the Pittsburgh Pirates of 2012. That these guys, they have rough patches throughout their career, and then they go to a new team, they dive into a little bit of metrics, and they figure out what's wrong with them, retool them, and, they have a real breakout season. It's happened before. Why can't it happen with Garrett Richards? I feel like Garrett Richards could be someone who could help Chris Paddock move around in the MLB and, really focus on staying there. They also have a pretty good bullpen. I mean, Kirby Yates comes back. Kirby Yates is a really good closer. He's no one to be scoffed at. So I truly feel that San Diego has a really good, really, really, really good opportunity to do something. At number 3, I got the Oakland Athletics. And this may seem like I'm stating a bit of the obvious with the last segment, saying that they had the most favorable schedule, having, 17 of their 60 games against teams that are above 500. But, here is exactly why I think that the team in the Bay can hoist the trophy at the end of the season. And if you've paid attention to anything throughout this entire podcast, you know where I'm going to start. Pitching. The Oakland Athletics are loaded with pitching, and it's nothing to be scoffed at. Let's just name a few. They got Mike Friars, Bassett, Frankie Montas, Luzardo, Minaya, Puck, Trevino, Liam Hendricks, Pettit, Soria, and surprisingly, the list does go on. There are always going to be loaded pitching staffs because that's just the culture of the A's. The A's always seem to have a good to really good pitching staff without really necessarily having the names. They've had a few names, obviously, back in the early 2000s with Mulder, Zito, and Hudson, and then they kind of came around again when they signed John Lester to the deal when he was between, when he was between the Red Sox and the Cubs. But they don't need those guys to win. And, let's go to the offensive side. They've rated in the top 5 in weighted runs created plus each of the last 3 seasons. You wouldn't expect that really from the A's because they don't have that person in the lineup where you look at them and you go, there's no way we should be messing with this guy. It really isn't. The team leader in home runs, Chris Davis with 47, but I mean, he has a 247 batting average. He's either a homer or bust. So you're willing to take your chances. You know, this team has so many sticks in the lineup. They have Ramon Laureano, Caja, Pinder, Grossman, Kemp, Simeon, Chapman, Olsen, Davis. And also, another thing that I think goes by the wayside when people talk about contenders in sports, they have incredible chemistry. If anyone has seen the pictures going around with they're out practicing in face masks that are Mike Fryer's really weird beard mustache combo. I don't even know what it is. Like, beard's only on one side, the mustache doesn't cover the other side. It's insane. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's disgusting. But it's stuff like that that keeps teams close, and teams that are super close are incredibly hard to deal with in the postseason. So that is something that you need to look for. And if I got 2 things to say about the Oakland Athletics, it's this. Watch out. Number 2. I have, if anybody's been listening to Scott Boras talk, this is his favorite team going into this season. The Cincinnati Reds. I think that the Cincinnati Reds are insanely good. You heard me ooh-ahing over their pitching staff earlier. I think that this is a team that is very primed to make a run in the postseason, especially since their miles traveled low, 5th lowest in the MLB, as I stated earlier. They have some of the easiest schedules in baseball, one of the easiest, if not the easiest. They're primed. They're so primed to make a run. You got everybody, like your catchers. You got Kurt Casale, backup, Tucker Barnhart. You got Joey Votto at first base still. Joey Votto is a great name. You got Mike Moustakas, who's a great player. Kyle Farmer. They even picked up Christian Colon for depth, like Josh Van Meter. You got so many guys. And then you have the sophomore season of, Aristides Aquino. Sorry, I mess up his name all the time. But he is insane. An insanely good player. You got, Scott Schiebler, Jesse Winkler, Nick Castellanos, Derek Dietrich, Nick Senzel, and we haven't even got to their bullpen. Freddie Galvis is going to be one of their DHs. Now, that is depth. That is something that should not be toyed with. The Cincinnati Reds are looking great, and they're pitching. It stands out. It speaks for itself. Luis Castillo, devastating changeup. Trevor Bauer, he says he wants to go every 4 days, which means, they can cut it to a 4-man rotation and take one of their starters and use one of their starters to beef off their bullpen. You got Sonny Gray, who's who's poised to have a bounce-back season. Anthony Descofini, Wade Miley. Man, the more I look at this team, the more I'm just so excited to watch them play this season. Pedro Strop in the bullpen, Justin Schaefer, Ryan Hendricks, Raisel Iglesias, so many names. They're definitely a team that I think is going to win the NL Central. I think they're going to take the NL Central, but I do think that the NL East team is going to be compromised because they're going to go through such a heavy, hectic schedule. They're going to be beaten down going into the postseason, and I feel like the Cincinnati Reds are going to be rather fresh. I feel like the Cincinnati Reds can really handle themselves and whoever they face in the postseason because their schedule is going to be so easy, and whoever they have to play is going to have to go through an insanely hard schedule. So watch out for the Cincinnati Reds. And lastly, my favorite team going into this season that I cannot wait to watch, my number one sleeper team, the Chicago White Sox. The Chicago White Sox are just so ready. They're so ready. They're so deep. They're so deep. You got Yoan Moncada, Tim Anderson, Lurie Garcia, Jose Abreu, their outfield, my favorite player to watch. I'm telling you right now, do not miss a Chicago White Sox game, because this man is going to do devastating things to opposing pitchers. I've been following Luis Robert for the past 3 seasons, and I've been waiting like a kid on Christmas to see this guy play in the bigs, and it looks like it's finally here, and I cannot be more excited if you can't tell. There a video surfaced today. He slipped while swinging during a scrimmage today, and he hit a ball 6 rows back to center field. He slipped. He lost his footing and had so much power he sent it 6 rows deep to center field. Luis Robert is going to be the man. Pair him in the outfield with Eloy Jimenez and Adam Engel. Where are you supposed to go from that? You know, Eloy Jimenez is 24, Adam Engel 29, Luis Robert 23. These guys are young, and they are ready. Lurie Garcia 30, Tim Anderson 28, Yoan Moncada 26. These guys are young. First base, Jose Abreu, and then you got Edwin Encarnacion as a DH. That is power on top of power on top of power. This team is nothing to mess with. I feel like this team is primed to go and I won't say run through the AL Central, but I feel like they're going to be in it with the Minnesota Twins, going blow for blow, neck and neck until the very end of the season. Let's go into their pitching. They just lost Michael Kopech. He says he doesn't want to play through COVID. That's fine. I get it. I mean, that's a tough decision. I can only imagine what the guy's going through. But it is a huge loss. I mean, he's 25 years old, but he was one of the best pitchers on their team last year. So that is a loss. But I think that they can get it through. They signed Dallas Keuchel last year, who I'm familiar with as a Braves fan. He did a wonderful job last year. There's no way around it. He did do a great job. We, as the Braves, they did not put up runs for him. Like, if you go back and watch those games, a lot of his games ended 2-1. They scored less than 3 runs in a lot of those games. So you can't look at his win-loss record and be like, oh, he had a bad year. He had a really good year. It's just the Braves didn't put up stats for him. And that's a shame, but it happened. And they still got Lucas Giolito. Lucas Giolito is insane, and everybody's saying that he's going to be, a Cy Young Award winner in the future. Give him, maybe next year. Reynaldo Lopez, he's 27. You got 26 in Lucas Giolito. Dylan Cease. They're, I don't think you understand how excited I am for this team. Steve Cishek coming out of the bullpen. Jimmy Cordero. Kelvin Herrera. Alex Colome. This team is so ready. Aaron Bummer is out. He's a formidable pitcher. He's no slouch. This team right here, I think, is my number one sleeper team to make the World Series. Oh, and oh my God, how could I forget? Catcher. They got Yasmani Grandal and James McCann. Yasmani Grandal is a very good hitting catcher. He brings a ton of power to the lineup. And if you ever want to sit, Jose Abreu for whatever reason, or you lose Jose Abreu, you can just slide Grandal into the DH role and move Edwin Encarnacion to first base, and you got James McCann. I'm not saying you don't miss a beat, but it's going to be a rather seamless transition. This team is so primed to make a run, and I cannot wait to see it. All right, everybody, that is going to be our show. I want to thank you so much for listening to it. I could not be happier with where I'm at. And I cannot be happier with the state of baseball. I'm a little pessimistic that, they may handle it wrong, but as of right now, I'm looking forward, and as I am so excited. So excited. And also, obviously, I would like to thank you for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Baseball Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that would also be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.